always fun.
Flew in?
Florida.
What were you doing?
Visiting my sister on one coast, and then we drove over to the other coast. We were on Merritt Island and at Fort Myers. I was kind of all over Florida.
That's where I did my temporary stint with United, Fort Myers.
Oh, yeah, it's really nice.
Fort Myers is not bad.
They got, what is it? The 1 year I was down there, they were awarded the best beach and the trashiest beach. He's not sick.
Standard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, they're the top of the
Florida is a strange place.
Okay.
very solid.
I lived there.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. A notice of an open work session of the City Council, the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, December 3rd, 2019. I guess rules of order and council procedure discussion. Eric, do you?
Yes, sir. Well, it was suggested that the council take some time to review its rules of order. We have supplied you the last official thing that was passed back in 1979. We don't have any staff presentation for the council. We're open to whatever discussion you have. If we can answer any questions, we'll try, but we have no report to make. So we open it to you.
Oh, can I start? You know, I think probably a lot of it's my fault. I haven't run by the rules as I know what they are, you know. And sometimes you guys are at fault for jumping in when you haven't been recognized. So I think all of us need to kind of step back and take a look at all this and get it worked out, you know. Anybody else?
Sure. Yeah. Make sure I get called on there. So I asked kind of for this because there's been some, you know, we had the marathon meeting on the bike lanes, and then we were putting a motion out. We didn't know how to do a motion and then amend the motion and then have discussion on the motion and how all that looked. And then at our last meeting, I asked if I could speak after a motion had been made and seconded, and I was told, no, we can't discuss after a motion has been made and seconded, that's not correct per most meeting rules. And I don't know that me saying anything would have made a difference on the final vote, but just having that ability to talk and knowing what the rules are. And then I've talked to Mr. Barzee and asked, you know, if in that case there's a question on the rules, if he would be willing to step in and offer, if he's asked what the correct rules are, to kind of keep us going on the right path. But I think that would help.
I was not at the last meeting, and I apologize for that. I was at the NLC conference, but I did watch it. And I think having some sort of guideline or framework would be good for our meetings. And you're right, Mr. Mayor, like I've been guilty of it, and other people have too, of jumping in. And we need to do a better job of being called on by you. But I think, you know, some of these, I mean, we've adopted this in 1979. I think it might be a good idea to just look at some of the things that we have. It's got the time at 7:45, talks about mail and things of that nature. So, you know, some things might need to be tweaked. And I can understand why Jesse brought it forward, and we want to, you know, at least be cohesive in council and move the meeting smoothly on. So, I mean, there's a few things in here that I see that could be changed, you know, for a lot of the things, the pronouns are he, and we've got, you know, a couple of great ladies on the council as well now. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's pretty well mine. I've read ours. If we're going to keep them, and we need something, it needs to be cleaned up. You know, the time's wrong. The gender thing is in there. Of course, it was all men at the time in the 70s on the council. Not very nice either. But you know, we do, and we've all not broken Robert's rules, I guess, but certainly rule of order. You know, like you say, everybody's talked out of turn. And I agree, though, that when a motion's made and seconded, it still needs a time for discussion on it, on the vote. And especially maybe you're not clear. You don't want to vote on something you're not clear on, one way or the other. So I believe that, you know, it's happened to me, too. If somebody made a motion one night, it's been a long time ago, and seconded, I said, wait a minute, I don't even understand exactly what we're voting on here, or, so I think, any rules, program you have, I think allows discussion before you actually vote on something. Other than that, I think we could work on what we already have and clean it up, modernize it, and everybody just pay attention, if your hand's up. The mayor can't see on both sides. He never looks at us. He always looks at the ladies. That's all I got.
If you'd shave.
Well, that's not gonna happen, so.
Rita?
Yeah, I also agree after looking at the resolution, it needs to be cleaned up, but I also think that anytime somebody's new to the council, they should get a copy of this in their new to the council package so that they have an opportunity to look at it, and we can all review it. If we all review it ourselves, I think we'll do a better job. We're still gonna talk over each other on occasion. It's gonna happen, but at least we need to be more mindful.
I might add that Crystal has added something to my agenda here. It says, like consent agenda, call for the motion, and then it says, any discussion. So we've got that on every one of them, and so I will be more mindful of that.
There you go.
Mr. Member,
Yes, sir.
can we hear from Mr. Barzee?
A couple of quick things that have been discussed, all very good. For example, the cleanup part, whether some of that stuff can just be removed totally. The reason is it's covered by ordinance. For example, our meeting time, as an example, that's in an ordinance and it's in our city code. There's a part in here that talks about calling our regular meetings. There's a part in here that talks about calling a special meeting. Those are all in the city code. It doesn't need to be really in our procedural rules, if you will. I think another thing to make it simple, in fact, if this had occurred, none of this we probably wouldn't even have had this discussion, so maybe it was a good thing that it happened, so we have a discussion and take a look at it. But as the mayor just indicated, Crystal has now placed on his sheet, his cheat sheet in front of him, some additional language after there's a motion and a second. Because the process that we've done here has been for many years, many years, that we would get a staff report, happens, then there's council discussion, usually amongst you folks, right? And then someone makes a motion and a second, and then generally there's a vote after that. The only problem with that part of it is some of them are no-brainers. I mean, all in favor. In other words, I can't remember the last time. We have had them, but it's been many years ago since we had a discussion on the pay ordinance. I mean, it's happened before. Well, there's a motion and a second, for the first reading, and all in favor, aye, opposed, and then, you call the roll at the end, and there's really not any real discussion. So that doesn't, but sometimes we don't know, we, as staff, and you folks even, don't know what the ultimate motion's gonna be based upon all of the discussion that's going on amongst you. So legitimately, I believe there does need to be an opportunity after there's a motion and a second, for the mayor to say, is there any further discussion, which would allow anyone the opportunity then to speak up. Again, hopefully it's just not restating everything that's just been said, that it's something, new and different that perhaps needs to be said, or maybe it's just after there's a motion and a second, maybe it's a question. I have a question about this, and Mr. Berlin, can you enlighten me on something here? What does the budget allow for this, or what have you? Whatever the question might be, before you've had a chance then to vote on what the motion is. I think that makes it smooth. From a technical standpoint, a lot of times you could do it a different way, but why change something that's generally worked? You could do it by, there's staff report, then there's a motion and a second, and then you have the discussion. The only problem with that is sometimes you don't know where you're going, and then you have a motion, and then you have to withdraw the motion, and then you go back, and then, or you amend the motion, and those things get more complicated. Look, in spite of what's happened in, I'll say this gratuitously, and, over the last month or so with Armour Road out here, this council has gotten along very, very, very well with one another, okay? And even when you had that discussion, I thought people were courteous and everything with each other. So I would hope that whatever you work out amongst, because these are actually your procedures and your rules, but what you don't want to do is adopt some rules. It's just, all it's going to do is then have a discussion over procedure as opposed to over substance. And, that's a waste of everybody's time, et cetera, when you start doing things like that. So I hope I didn't get too far out into left field, but understand one last thing. You 9 people, I know Fred's not here tonight, but the 8 council members and the mayor are the people that attend these meetings that are the elected people, elected by the people to serve. You should be able to always have an opportunity to be heard, to speak up on something. And then, just use your own best judgment on how many times you need to say the same thing.
So could we, I agree, I've had some conversations with Mr. Barzee and Mr. Berlin about Robert's rules and how they can become very official and labor intensive and hard to get around, making sure that we're not just focused too much on procedure. Would it be, if it pleases the council, would it be okay to have Mr. Barzee take a look at what we've got here, these 1979 ones, and clean out anything that's duplicated in the code or changed up to the code now, and then clean up any language that's in there and maybe send it to us for our thoughts, and then we could have an actual vote at a meeting to formalize those rules. Not anything as nearly as official as Robert's rules, but something along these lines that are, a little more modernized, and then you could be, if need be, the person who speaks to, well, that isn't how it works, or that is how it works.
I'd be happy to do that. That's not a problem.
So I'm good with that. Originally I kind of was leaning towards Robert's Rules of Order or something that, others have kind of worked on over the years, but I very much agree with you that sometimes meetings can get so caught up in process that you do lose the substance. And in the time I've been on this council, I've actually felt like it's been a very functional council. So we do disagree at times, but that's okay. And we have our own, buttons that get pushed, things like that. But for the most part, I think it's been a very functional council, and it's, for me, the process has been very functional as well for the most part. So I'm happy with that suggestion.
If I could add just one more thing kind of on this, it would be helpful if we get a little bit of, from the whether it's any of us, here at this table or whatever, if we see something going on, sometimes we're a little bit cautious about injecting ourselves into your discussion, but if it seems to be, we've missed something from a real procedural standpoint, that we should feel comfortable if everybody's agreeable to that, whether it's Mr. Berlin or myself or the assistant, whoever, or even the city clerk noticing something that, isn't happening, that we'd be able to at least maybe get the mayor's attention to be able to, because it's always difficult for a staff to inject ourselves in any way in your discussion. And we wouldn't do it unless there was something that was being misstated that we knew as staff wasn't correct, okay? Or we saw that something was being done that was maybe overlooked, and I think it would be unintentionally overlooked. Things went so quick with your example. To be candid with you, I've thought about that, and I'm not really even sure if the mayor knew what had happened, okay? And because it clearly, as the chair of the meeting, he started it, and he was man enough to stand up and say, hey, I should have taken a little bit better control over what's been going on. And one thing, if you can always remember to do, you do a pretty good job, but try to make sure all your comments always go through the chair, and then that way, it'll avoid some of this talking over one another.
Okay, I think we're calling all in a kind of an agreement, or you're gonna look over the thing and,
We'll bring something, Tom will take a look at it, and we'll bring something to you with cleanup and any other ideas that he might have, but probably nothing terribly elaborate. We'll bring that to you for your further consideration, and probably involve a repeal of resolution number 293 at some point.
yeah. Anybody else?
Move to adjourn the special meeting,
All in
work
favor?
session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, that was pretty easy.
Pretty easy.